On the Estonian coast stand 2 nuclear reactors sealed inside concrete. The Soviets used them to train submarine crews in a city that was on no map. And when they walked away, they left the tomb behind. For half a century, Estonia was the Soviet Union's northwestern rampart, a coastline the Kremlin closed off, wired shut, and filled with things it never admitted existed. Air bases and mine depots, a submarine base hidden in a bay, a secret uranium town with no name, a prison that dug its own quarry. In 1991, the empire let go, and in 1994, its soldiers marched out, leaving almost everything they had built exactly where it stood. These are 8 forbidden Soviet places sealed away across Estonia, and they grow stranger as we count down. We begin at number 8. Number 8, Linnahall in Tallinn, built for the sailing events of the 1980 Moscow Olympics. It was christened the V.I. Lenin Palace of Culture and Sport. A vast grey slab dropped onto the shoreline. Its roof, a public staircase climbing straight out of the sea. 5,000 seats inside. An ice rink. A heliport with flights to Helsinki, 60 miles across the water. This was the Soviet Union's window on the west, and it was built to impress the people looking through it. Today, the doors are welded shut. The concrete is cracked and tagged with graffiti. Grass pushes up through the terraces, and the heliport has been dark since 2001. The building is too vast to demolish, too broken to reopen, and too famous to touch, so it simply sits there on the waterfront, a Soviet monument the city cannot get rid of, staring out at the Baltic. Number 7, Viivikonna. In Estonia's northeast, the Soviets tore open the ground to get at oil-shale, the rock that burns, and built whole towns on top of the mines. Viivikonna was one of them. Rows of workers' housing, a shop, a school, a culture club with columns at the door, thrown up in the 1940s and staffed with miners brought in from across the Union. The shale they cut fed power stations that lit half the republic. Then the mines closed. The work went to Kohtla-Järve and Narva, and Viivikonna emptied street by street. A few dozen people still live there among boarded windows and collapsing stairwells. Everything else is being taken back by birch trees. The club where miners once watched films now stands open to the sky, and the road in is quiet enough to hear the wind. Number 6, Kiltsi. On the flat coast near Haapsalu, the Soviets poured a runway 2 kilometers long and turned a stretch of farmland into a military airfield. Bombers were dispersed behind earth revetments. Fuel bunkers went into the fields. The families who had worked that land for generations were pushed off it, and the whole area vanished behind a fence and a warning sign. The aircraft flew out in the early 90s and never came back. What is left is a runway going nowhere. 2 kilometers of cracked Soviet concrete with weeds forcing their way through the joints, hangars stripped down to their frames, and hard stands where nothing has parked in 30 years. Locals drive out here to teach their children how to drive. Number 5, Naissaar, the island of women. For centuries, a few hundred Estonian Swedes fished and farmed here, an hour off Tallinn. In 1940, the Soviets took the island, deported its people to the mainland, and declared the whole thing a closed military zone. In their place came a garrison, a naval mine depot, and a narrow gauge railway laid across the island to haul the mines from the factory down to the sea. Naissaar became one of the largest sea mine dumps in the Baltic. When the garrison finally pulled out, it burned what it could not carry and left the rest where it lay. Thousands of mine casings stacked in the pines. They are still there today, rusting in neat rows on the forest floor beside empty barracks, a ruined officers' club, and a railway that carries nothing at all. Number 4, Hara. On the north coast, tucked inside a quiet bay, the Soviets poured a pier of concrete for the Baltic fleet and built a demagnetization base. Submarines were brought in, wrapped in heavy cable, and had their magnetic signature stripped away, so that Western sensors sweeping the Baltic would find nothing where they passed. It was one of the most secret installations on the Estonian shore, and the fishermen who lived along that coast were not allowed near it. The fleet left in 1991 and the sea moved in. The piers are still standing. A grid of cracked concrete out in the shallows, rebar bleeding rust into the water, the control buildings gutted and scrawled with paint. Divers and photographers come here now in the summer The harbour that made submarines disappear has become the easiest secret in Estonia to find. Number 3. Sillamäe. On a bluff above the Gulf of Finland, the Soviets found something they wanted very badly: shale rich in uranium. So they built a factory to process it, and beside the factory, a town for the people who worked there. Broad boulevards, a neoclassical culture house, a monumental stairway sweeping down towards the sea. It looked like a resort on the Riviera. It was making the raw material for the Soviet bomb, and then they erased it. Sillamäe was struck from the maps and the census. It had no name, only a postbox number. You could not travel there without a permit, and the Estonians who lived a few kilometers away were not allowed inside. Prisoners of war and forced laborers worked the earliest ore. For 40 years, the plant sent its uranium east and told the world nothing at all. Sillamäe is open now and still standing, one of the best preserved Stalinist towns anywhere in Europe. But the factory left a bill behind it. On the shore of the Baltic Sea sits a waste pond of radioactive tailings, 12 million tons of it, held back from the water by an earth wall. It took a European cleanup program and years of work to cap the thing. Number 2. Rummu, a limestone quarry cut 40 meters down into the earth, and right beside it, a prison. The Soviets put the two together deliberately. Muru prison stood on the rim, and the men held inside it went down every day to cut the stone. Guards above, inmates below, and a working industrial pit that ran on prison labour for decade after decade. The pit stayed dry only because pumps ran day and night, holding the groundwater out. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, the money stopped, and the pumps stopped with it. The water came up slowly and took everything in the quarry with it. The workshops, the machinery, the vehicles, the lower prison buildings. What was left behind was a lake, turquoise from the limestone, cold and very deep, with a drowned prison lying under the surface. Today, it's one of the strangest swimming spots in Europe. Divers drop through cold green water past submerged walls, sunken trucks, and the tops of drowned trees. On the surface, a white mountain of quarry spoil rises straight out of the beach, and the old watchtowers are still standing on the shoreline, looking down at the swimmers. Number 1, Paldiski, a small port town 40 kilometers west of Tallinn, with a harbour that stays ice-free through the Baltic winter. In 1962, the Soviet Navy took the whole place, not part of it, all of it, and turned it into a closed city. 16,000 personnel behind a fence, with their own shops, their own schools, their own everything. Estonians needed a permit to enter their own coastline. And on the maps, Paldiski was nothing. They called the main building the Pentagon. Inside it stood 2 nuclear reactors, not models, not simulators, real working reactors, land-based copies of a submarine's power plant, each one built inside a full-scale section of a submarine hull. Crews learned their trade on live nuclear cores in a hall in the middle of an Estonian town. Thousands of submariners passed through the training center before the last course ended. Then the empire ended. Estonia was independent and the last Russian troops had to leave. But a nuclear reactor cannot simply be handed over with the keys, so the fuel was pulled out and shipped east. The reactor compartments were welded shut, wrapped, and encased in concrete. In September 1995, the site was finally given back to Estonia. What Estonia received was a sarcophagus. The reactors are still in there, still sealed, still monitored by Estonian technicians who check the concrete and weight, because the waste inside will not be safe to move for decades yet. Around the tomb, the closed city has thawed out. The barracks are ruins, the officers' club has lost its roof, and the sea wind blows through the windows of the empty apartment blocks the Navy left behind. That is the promise this started with. 2 reactors on the Estonian coast, entombed in concrete because there was no other way to leave them behind. A dead staircase on the Tallinn waterfront. Birch trees growing through a mining town. A runway going nowhere. Sea mines rusting in the pines. Drowned piers in a northern bay. A uranium town that had no name. A prison lying under a lake. And a sealed reactor hall that Estonia will still be watching long after everyone who built it is gone. Next time, a mountain in Bulgaria and the concrete flying saucer the Communist Party abandoned on top of it.